Thrones interview we did was a lot of fun many years ago.
Yeah.
I guess we'll start off. We're doing a Comic-Con channel on SiriusXM. So.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Dave Z. This is SiriusXM's Comic-Con Radio, and I'm joined by, honestly, a man who really needs no introduction. I think everybody probably listening to this channel knows who he is. Peter Jackson, thanks for joining us.
Very welcome. Hi.
I've got to start it all off. Are you in the process of developing a time machine? Because I heard you flew in last night and you're flying back tonight.
Yeah, it's not so bad. I mean, you fly during the night, and so I'm so exhausted after just finishing up 266 days of shooting that I can, anywhere I have a seat and I can put my head down, I fall asleep straight away. So it's not as bad as it seems. It's a 12-hour flight, and I can generally sleep for 8 or 9 hours of that. So
there you go.
It doesn't make it too bad. And I've actually got to get back to New Zealand tomorrow, and we start shooting our pickups. We've got 10 days of more shooting to do.
So now add to the 260 and make it 270.
277 probably by the time we're done. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, what was it like to go back to Middle Earth? Were you fully prepared once Guillermo del Toro left the project?
Not really. No, I didn't have as much pre-production as I wanted, because Guillermo was developing it, for about 18 months, and we never had a green light. We never had even MGM, which is one of the partner studios with Warner Brothers. They were on the verge of bankruptcy, according to what we were reading, and there was a lot of doubt, and so Guillermo hung in there as long as he could. But then when he ultimately had to leave to move on to other projects, and it took another 3 or 4 months before we had a green light. And at that stage, I was thinking, well, I should do this. I've got to now, seriously get this film made after all the problems that we've had. But it left me with only 3 or 4 months of pre-production.
Wow.
So we've been really doing, as we've been shooting the movie, I've been looking ahead to the next 4 or 6 weeks and then designing everything I need beyond that. I've been sort of doing my pre-production as we've been shooting, which over an 18-month period is not too difficult to do.
Now, I was curious from a narrative standpoint, what was the biggest challenge of actually adapting the book into 2 separate films?
Well, the challenge with any adaptation, or even just making a film, is the structure of the film. You've got to structure it in such a way that it has an emotionally fulfilling story, that it engages the characters, engages the audience. It's all the same issues that you really deal with any film. And obviously, if you're taking a story and chopping it into 2 parts, you've got to be particularly careful that it doesn't just stop. You've got to actually create an ending, and that's what we've had to do. We've had to craft an ending for the first film that feels real and organic. But there is a lot of material, because what you have to realise is it's not just The Hobbit, which in itself is a fairly slim novel. It's material that Tolkien wrote where he was intending at some point after Lord of the Rings was published, which was published some 16 or 17 years after The Hobbit. And he obviously had in those intervening years, he'd expanded his mythology enormously. And he looked back on The Hobbit and thought, what, a lot of things that were happening around the time of The Hobbit, I want to be talking about those as they later relate to The Lord of the Rings, which is set 60 years later. So Tolkien, I think, at some point was planning to revise The Hobbit, and he never did. But what survives is 125 pages of notes of his, of what other things were happening in Middle Earth at the time that The Hobbit was taking place. And that was published in The Return of the King, and some of the later editions as the appendices to Return of the King. There's 125 pages of material which we had the rights to use for these movies, and so we've really, we've gone way beyond The Hobbit, and we've bought a lot of that material, and there's a lot more that we could have done too. It's rich material, and all of that's been woven into the story of The Hobbit as well.
Now, I was actually curious, because in the book, Gandalf actually leaves the group to deal with the necromancer. Is that something that we'll see in the film? Yeah,
well, you see, that's a good case in point, because in the book he disappears from the group, and it's never really explained why. But later on, Tolkien, because he had to devise the introduction of Sauron back into Middle Earth for Lord of the Rings, he created this character, the necromancer, who plays a part in that storyline, and so he much later wrote what Gandalf was doing during these disappearances from The Hobbit. So yes, that's exactly the sort of material that we've adapted and included in the movie. Yeah.
Now, for an unexpected journey, will we actually see Smaug, or is this going to be something for the...
There'll be glimpses of him.
Okay, that's what I was curious.
You won't see him incredibly clearly, but he definitely plays a role. I won't say anything else. You'll see him. You'll see him much more next year. But He's teasing glimpses of them.
Cool. One of my memories of The Hobbit is, of course, the riddle scene between Gollum and Bilbo. And I was really curious from a pacing standpoint, is that a difficult scene to really work into the rest of the film?
Yeah, it's a good point about the pacing. It is, but it's such an essential Hobbit scene. I mean, it's really, it's one of the things that you look forward to when you think about the Hobbit, is that confrontation. So we have we've certainly, you know, given it some screen time, and I don't think pacing matters so much as long as it's entertaining and it has tension behind it, because, you know, Gollum is going to kill Bilbo. He's intending to, and especially when he realises what Bilbo has got in his pocket, he gets particularly deadly. So there is an enormous tension under the scene, which I think is going to help with the pacing a lot.
Now, I think I might have asked you this before when we talked about Lovely Bones, but I was really curious, as a director, do you see yourself as an observer or the storyteller?
The storyteller. I mean, I try to create a structure and a movie. I try to film a movie in a way that people can actually immerse themselves in the film. So observing was almost the opposite of what I try and do. I try to engage people, and I try to immerse them in the world of the film.
Cool. We're running out of time, and I really want to hit some of the technical stuff. One of the things, shooting in 3D, what was that like for you as a director? Did it change the way you actually visualize the frame at all?
Not really, no. I tried to not let it do that. I wanted to go back into Middle Earth with this as the same director that I went on that journey 12 years ago. So I didn't want any technical aspects to change the way I shot the film. So to me, 3D is a bonus. I mean, 3D is a way of dimensionalizing the world, but the camera and the style of my shooting is almost identical as far as I'm aware.
Now, with Convergence, are you really going to push things into the negative space and kind of play with it in that manner? Or are you really looking at depth?
Both. I think there's so many theories about it, and as filmmakers experiment, like, you know, with what Scorsese did on Hugo, he was really pushing things into the negative space. It was very, very aggressive 3D, but it was actually okay. It was all right. I mean, he was breaking a lot of rules in terms of what you should be, you know, pushing out of the screen towards the audience. And so I think that movie showed you that a lot of rules are made to be broken. So I think we'll definitely be playing with both, and a lot of Convergence can be altered in post-production too, so the creativity can still be carrying on all the way through post.
Now, you also shot in 5K and 48 frames per second, a lot of hoopla about that. I really just wanted to bring up what you thought about the importance of that. It seems like all other mediums are essentially using technology and advancing the technology, whereas the film industry seems to be really hesitant. Like 3D has been a slow adoption period. Do you think this is a really important move for the industry in general to bring audiences back to theaters? Yeah, I mean,
I do. I think that, you know, embracing and clinging onto the technology of 1930, which is what 24 frames a second is, in fact 1927, is not really helpful to anybody. I mean, people can say it has a cinematic look, you know, people can have all sorts of theories about how it's the look of film as opposed to the look of TV or video or whatever it is, but, you know, at the end of the day, young kids who probably don't care about frame rates, who don't give a toss about strobing or artifacts or what the film look is, they're not coming to the movies anymore. They're happy, they're content to watch films on their iPads and on their home entertainment systems. And so I think anything we can do to provide a much more spectacular, immersive experience in the cinema and say, hey, just remember the movies, you pay your money, you sit in a chair and you have an incredibly exhilarating experience.
Yes.
The more we can you know, do to remind people that that's a lot of fun and it's a good way to spend your entertainment dollar. I think as an industry we have to be doing these things. I think being stuck in the technology of last century is not helpful to anybody.
Very true. I'm out of time, but I last but least have to ask Howard Shore's score. You're working with him once again.
Yes.
Are you looking to continue the themes from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, or are you looking to do something unique and different with Hobbit?
Both. I mean, obviously, we're themes that we've established, like Gollum and the Ring and the Shire. Where themes are appropriate, we're reprising themes, but there's obviously a lot of new characters, a lot of new stories, so there's a lot of terrific new themes as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, Howard's composed most of the music for the first film. He starts recording it with the London Philharmonic in 5 or 6 weeks.
Nice. Really looking forward to it. Anyways, Peter Jackson, thank you so much for spending time on.
Very welcome. It's been fun. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, man.